Ok. Uh, Ciao a tutti, io sono Giovanni Bassi, io non parlo italiano molto bene, quindi la presentazione sarà in inglese. Il mio padre è italiano e io parlo un po'. Forse prossimo anno io parlerò in inglese, in italiano. Well, we're gonna do this in English. I'm sorry. I am not yet fluent in Italian. But maybe next year. This is gonna be Deno, and why use Deno? I'm Giovanni Bassi. You can find here my social networks. Actually, I'll talk a little bit about myself later. This is the CodeGen conference. This is the hashtag you can use to talk about it. I am a developer in Brazil. I work at a company called Lambda 3. It's a company I founded 11 years ago. I'm a Microsoft MVP. And I'm a rock climber, a cyclist, a motorcyclist. I'm an amateur drummer, an amateur mechanic. And I've been talking about technology for about 15 years now. The easiest way to talk to me is through Twitter. I'm on Twitter all the time, so you can talk to me at Giovanni Bassi. I'm usually speaking in Portuguese there, but if you can DM me if you want, if you have any questions. At Lambda 3, we do all these technologies. We are a Microsoft partner company, but we do all of those. We are very strong on Node.js as well, so and on Linux. So this is something I like to do very much. Okay, let's start the talk. If you need, you can find the links for this talk at bit.ly/Deno talk, or you can scan this QR code now. I'll show it again at the end of the presentation. So there will be all the demos and the links for the demos, and you can download the presentation and everything. Okay. So what is Deno? Deno is a JavaScript runtime and TypeScript runtime. It's in clear competition with Node.js. It's based on V8, just like Chrome and Node.js. V8 is Chrome's JavaScript engine, and it is what Node.js uses as well. It is secure by default. It's one executable built with Rust. This is a main advantage actually over Node.js because it's much easier to evolve than C++, which is Node.js language. It comes with batteries included. It has, for example, formatter. It has tests and the REPL and several other things. I'll talk more about it later. It has a standard library. It is multi-platform since the beginning. It's also in contrast with Node.js, which was born on Linux only and was later ported to Mac and Windows. And it's free and open source. Deno is a very much younger project, and because of that, it has some advantages over Node.js as well. For example, it was born when we already had ES modules, ECMAScript modules, so it already uses ECMAScript modules since the beginning. It doesn't use common JS modules like Node.js uses. It also doesn't have the Node modules directory. Resources for Deno are loaded from URLs and cached globally. It doesn't need a package management application like npm or yarn, and it also can be used as a library in Rust if you want it. If you program in Rust, you can use the Deno crate to program a JavaScript interpreter in your application. Deno was announced at JSConf in 2008 in a talk from the Node.js creator Ryan Dahl. You can find here the link to this conference. It's bit.ly/DenoJSConf. It's a YouTube presentation. It's all. You can also scan the QR code here. The talk is named "The 10 Regrets from Node.js," but he only lists 7 for some reason. Probably submitted a talk before he actually made the presentation. He probably only found 7 later. So the 7 regrets he mentions in the talk are all solved on Deno. At the end of the talk, he actually mentions that he's working on a new JavaScript runtime, and he mentions Deno. So this is actually when Deno was introduced. So the regrets are not using all the regrets were solved, right, in Deno. So the regrets are not using promises in Node.js. Node.js has a callback based API on its standard library. Security, Node.js is able to do anything the user in the system can do. So it can be really dangerous because you're downloading scripts from the internet and running them. So I'll talk about this a little bit more on how Deno solves this later. The build system, the Git build system, which is used to build native dependencies, is also a regret. And if you have used Node.js and its build system, you probably have had problems with it. The package JSON, Ryan didn't like the package JSON, what it became, and the way it would define dependencies and everything. So Deno doesn't have a package JSON file. Node modules, the idea of using local packages, local modules was a problem, is a problem in the Node.js ecosystem, and was a regret for Ryan. And requiring a module without the .js extension. In Deno, all imports are made with the extension. And using index.js as a way to require a directory. This actually led to several problems, and it doesn't exist in Deno as well. Version 1.0 was delivered for Deno was delivered on May 13th last year, 2020, about 9 months ago. Current version is 1.7.2, and it's already using TypeScript 4. They actually released one yesterday, 1.7.3, but the binaries are not available to download yet. I just checked like 30 minutes ago. But there is a new version coming very soon. This is very interesting because they are releasing new versions all the time with improvements. It's Deno was initially written in Go and later was migrated to Rust, which is something I personally like very much because I really enjoy Rust. So it's very nice to see that they did that. The main reasons was that they had having 2 runtimes was a problem because Go already has a runtime and Rust doesn't have a runtime. And also maybe they were worried about garbage collection pressure from Go along with JavaScript's garbage collection. So this also could be a problem. And Rust is a language that doesn't have a runtime and doesn't have a garbage collection. It has a deterministic way of releasing memory. So they changed to Rust in the beginning of the project. The standard library for Deno is not yet stable. It's at version 0.87.0 at this moment, and it's available at deno.land/std. So they released version 1 of Deno last year on May, but the standard library is still evolving. It's actually mostly stable. Some parts of it are not changing that much, and applications are actually reasonably stable, but they still change parts of it. We are still waiting for a stable release for the standard library. Regarding the Deno's status, Deno works, but it's still a very recent ecosystem and platform. Dev tools are still maturing. and also the library ecosystem is also maturing. So there are some parts of it that are mature, there's some parts that are not. Several features are still in preview, and others are not yet mature. Sometimes you find some bugs, from time to time, but it usually works fine most of the time. And they haven't talked yet about a long-term support version, so we don't know when and if that will ever come. Now we're talking about some specific points here regarding the Deno ecosystem. Completions, if you're using the VS Code extension, which is already available, completions work just fine. And they have already an implementation of the language service protocol in Deno, which will allow for much faster tooling support from now on. It was released in the version 1.6, if I recall correctly. Understanding of the environment with the VS Code extension is very good as well. It understands the Deno standard library and types and everything. The typings work fine. You can debug is more or less working. The extension doesn't provide a debug, but you can use the built-in VS Code support for Node to debug Deno, and it works very well. We're still waiting for debug support on the VS Code extension. Regarding libraries, it's a new ecosystem. Everything is just starting. So some libraries are not stable yet, but we actually have a very good support at this moment. And I'll talk a bit about this in the next slide. Standard library is in preview and it's mostly stable, but some things are still improving as well. It's reasonably, the whole ecosystem is reasonably stable, and every now and then you'll find some bugs, and every now and then they break something in the standard library, or the libraries break something when a new version is released. And regarding integration with the current ecosystem, when we talk about Node, there is no integration, and I'll talk about this later. And regarding a browser, they're actually being one of the goals for Deno is being very compatible with the browser APIs. So this is very interesting. Node never did that, and Deno is trying to be very much compatible. Okay, what do we already have when we talk about the library ecosystem? We have web frameworks that work really well. We have drivers from MariaDB and MySQL and Postgres and other databases. We have ORMs. We have libraries for migrations, for database migrations. We have cryptography with bcrypt, and it works fine for cryptography. It's very powerful. JWT support. And we have new libraries coming out every day. It's very interesting because it's like we are having a reboot for the backend JavaScript ecosystem, because Node.js's ecosystem actually matured several years ago, and the libraries haven't changed in all this time. For example, we have Express.js for Node. It's a very old library and has been the default library for web in Node for several years, and not any other library has been able to dethrone it because it's so popular. What we're seeing now in Deno is that new libraries are coming out every day, and we are seeing new ideas, fresh ideas coming out all the time. So this is it's a very nice moment to actually see this whole ecosystem maturing. Comparing Node.js to Deno, if you're coming from a Node.js background, I made this table so you can kind of find yourself on where the concepts are. So regarding the project definition file, Node.js has a package JSON file. Deno doesn't have any file that defines the project. You have a home directory, and that's where your application is. Node.js has a lock file called package lock JSON. Deno also has a lock file, but the name is optional. You can name it whatever you want. So you can name it, for example, Deno lock JSON. That's a very common name. Package management, Node uses npm or yarn, and you don't need a package management application in Deno, so it's unnecessary. For the package site, everybody uses npmjs.com or maybe a private site. Deno doesn't need a package site. Any hosting site is enough to host a package. But what's happening is people are actually hosting in GitHub and mirroring in at deno.land/x. So if you want to find packages, that's where you go, deno.land/x. So this is really interesting, but you don't actually need to host it there. You can host it anywhere. REPL, when you can run the node REPL just typing node, and the same thing is true for Deno, just typing Deno. For tests, the Node.js ecosystem is very rich. You have several test frameworks like Mocha and Jasmine and Jest. Deno also has libraries that you can use, but Deno brings included the ability to test, and it brings a test framework included. So you can just type Deno test, and I'll show a demo of this later. To execute a file, you just run node and the file, and in Deno you run Deno run and the file. To install dependencies in Node, you run npm install. In Deno, that's unnecessary. When the application starts, it will download whatever dependencies it has, but you can cache the dependencies with Deno cache if you want. So that's what you would do, for example, if you wanna have a Docker image for a Deno application, you run Deno cache and cache the dependencies. You can install global dependencies with an npm using npm install global, and in Deno you run Deno install and the URL of the application, and I'll demo that later as well. Comparing the projects, Deno is 2 years old. Node is about 11 years old. Deno already has 72,000 stars, and Node has 77, so they're really close. You can see that people are really excited about the project. Deno has had 168 releases, and Node has had 652 as of yesterday. And Deno has 570 contributors, and Node has almost 3,000 contributors. I believe that the number of contributors in Deno increased really fast because Deno uses Rust, and which is easier to contribute to. Well, we'll see if that actually happens, but that's what I think will happen. Deno comes with batteries included. For example, for docs, you can run Deno doc and point it to a file, and it will show the docs. For format, Deno has built-in format, which is very opinionated, which is something that's very nice, because all applications are actually formatted the same, and there's no discussion about which formatting we are going to use, what style we are going to use. So this actually eliminates a lot of the discussion about it. So you run it with Deno FMT. You can bundle your application with Deno bundle, which will generate one single executable, one single JavaScript file. And you can also use Deno compile to actually generate one single executable that you can run later. That's one application, one file that you can then publish to production. This is still unstable. It's a very recent thing. It was released on 1.6, if I recall correctly. You can lint the application with Deno lint. It is still unstable as well. And you can upgrade the Deno itself with Deno upgrade. Regarding security, Deno is incapable of doing what it shouldn't do unless you let it. So by default, Deno is unable to read and write to environment variables. to access high resolution time, which can be dangerous for time attacks and fingerprinting. Deno is unable to talk on the network unless you let it, and if you want to let Deno talk to on the network, you actually need to access the network. You actually need to allow it, and you can optionally restrict the domains you can talk to. Deno is able to execute plugins, but only if you let it. To access the disk, you have to actually give it permission to read or to write, and you can actually give permission to specific directories or files to read and or to write. And process execution is also restricted. And this is the most dangerous one, right? Because if you allow Deno to execute a process, you actually allow it to do anything, right? Because you can also start another Deno that can do everything or whatever process. So this is the most dangerous one. In case of missing permissions, the application won't even start. What happens is you try to run Deno with a JavaScript application that tries to access the disk, for example. When Deno notices that the application is trying to do that, it stops and the application doesn't even start. So this is very nice because you can try things, and if the application crashes because of permissions, you know that you probably are using a library that's doing something that's not supposed to be doing. So this is very interesting. There is a VS Code extension that you can download, which blinks completions and Deno modules and types and etc. The bug's not working yet, but I'll show you a way to make debugging work. And there's also a Canary extension published to the Visual Studio Marketplace, which is using the Deno language service. But this is it's not yet as powerful as the one I'm showing you right now. The Canary is a work in progress, and you shouldn't use it at this moment unless you really want to be on the bleeding edge and see how things are working. This is a very nice extension, and it works really well in Visual Studio Code. Integration with the current ecosystem is non-existent. It's like we're starting from scratch. You can forget Webpack, Gulp, NPM, Yarn, SLint, all those wonderful extensions for TypeScript and JavaScript. They will not work with Deno. There is a compatibility library for Node.js. It's incomplete and unstable, and it's used only if you are porting a library from Node to Deno, okay? And it's not complete, so the library might not work, so you have to be careful. Sometimes all of a sudden a Node modules directory shows up in your working directory because you are using some extension from Visual Studio Code that's made to work with Node. And this is really annoying because one of the things you want is to not have the Node.js directory because Deno doesn't need it. So you have to be careful when you are using these extensions because they will actually create this Node.js, Node modules directory. And it's really annoying, so be careful with that. If that happens, you know why it's doing it. It's because of an extension. A cool tool is Deno Version Manager. If you are working with more than one Deno version, if you're not, you can just upgrade with Deno Upgrade. That's fine. I've been doing some demos, and it's every now and then a demo breaks, and I need to go back to a specific version, and I'm using this tool, so it's actually very useful. I'll show you how it works also. So now I'm going to do some demos, not denos. Let me see if you have any questions that I can answer before we go on. Okay, no questions so far. So I'll just move forward and do oh, hold on, let me see, it's still loading the questions. Hold on. Okay, no questions yet. So if you want to make a question, you can go ahead and make a question, and I'll answer it at the end. Let's go ahead and work on the demo. So what I'll be doing a demo on Linux, but this is WSL, which is Windows subsystem for Linux in Windows. So I'm actually in Windows, but using a Linux environment in Windows. Okay. So here I'll show you the version I have. I actually have. You can run Deno info, and it will show you the directories you're using. And Deno version will show you what version you are on. So it also shows you the V8 version and the TypeScript version. And you can get into the REPL running Deno, or you can do Deno REPL as well. And then you have some options when you run Deno REPL. So if you just run Deno REPL like that, it will go into the REPL, and then you can do whatever you want. Like that, and it just works. Okay. Deno has a lot of, it has completions as well, as you can see. I just did Deno tab. It has eval as well if you want, and you can do something like that, and it will work. Okay, so you can execute arbitrary JavaScript like that. And you can run anything that is in a file or in a URL. So for example, a very common thing to try out Deno is to run the chat server. So what's going on now is that, oops, oh, it doesn't work. You see, I tried to access the network and it failed. I need to allow it to access the network. So it tells me here, how about using with allow net flag? So what you do is you do Deno run and then you allow net, and then it runs. Oops, it has to be in the beginning. Allow net. Now it's gonna run. So it's starting a server on port 8080. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna open a browser and access port 8080, and I'll do the same in another tab here, and I'll show you what happens. So here's one window, here's the other one. So the two of them are connected. You can see down there the messages that are coming through. So I can say hello, and it will send. And you can see the message down here, and you can see the other window received it. And hi, it goes back, and I can close the connection here. The code is 0. If I close the tab, I get a different close reason, and then I connect back and close again. So that just works. So this is a very simple demo that Deno just works. So I'll show you now one application that I have written that's really simple. So let me show you the source code. This is the application. So it's reading from, you can see here, it's importing from the Deno server. So it's importing using ECMAScript modules, and then the serve function. And then I'm defining here a few variables, and then running serve on this host and port. And then whenever here's the main function, and then whenever I get a request from the server, which is defined here, then I'm gonna write that I got it, and then respond with the same body that I got. Okay, no, sorry, we're gonna respond with hello world, and then we're gonna say that we are listening and run main. So if we try to Deno run source hello 1, it fails because we have to allow it to access the network. And then we can run, and then if I try to curl, I will get the hello world here. You can see gotta get at, and if I post at foo. Oops, what did I do wrong? Oh, port, I forgot the port. 8080. Oh, 8,000. 8,000. Okay, I got hello world, and then it did that. It got a post here. So that's super simple web server there with like 16 lines of code. You can cache your dependencies. So how do you do that? You run Deno cache. Oh, let me show you before we do that. Let me show you something else. I also have the hello TS file. The hello TS file is that just like the other one, but it's loading from HTTP and not HTTPS, blah, 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 blah. Okay, full URL. So what's happened is I replaced this whole thing with HTTP. This is what it's here. The rest is the same. So what happens is I have an import map.json, and I'm mapping this here to this URL. So this is an import map. This is an unstable feature for Deno. Okay. So this actually makes it easier to upgrade versions later. Okay, this is a standard library version at version 0.87. Later, I don't have to go in everywhere in my files and change it manually. I can just change in this file. Okay, so to cache this application, I actually have to inform it that I'm using the import map. So what I do is this: I inform the lock file I want created. I want to write the lock. I use the unstable flag because I'm using the import map, and I say I tell it to look at all the TS files at the source and test directories, and then it will run and check everything and cache it in the global directory. If it didn't do anything because it already had done the cache, if I had reload, then you can see that it's actually going to the internet and looking for all the dependencies and caching it. Okay, so this is how we do it. And to actually run the application using the import map, it's actually the same thing. You simply do Deno run and then you allow net just as before, but you have to add the unstable and import map JSON, and then it just runs just like before because it's the same code. To create the bundle, it will create a direct here in the directory in the dist. So let's just remove dist and recreate it. So now we have nothing here, and let's now bundle the hello application. So we run Deno bundle and the hello.ts, and we want to generate this hello.js file. And then we can simply run this file by running Deno run. And then it's running. Okay, this contains everything that you need. So it's a bundle with 44 kilobytes. This is the whole application. Okay, if you actually look into this file, you can see that the whole application is here, and it has 1,400 lines, and somewhere here there will be our hello world. Our code is at the end. You can see here the code right at the end. So here's what it is. We can also compile the whole application. So let's delete the bundle and actually compile the application. Let me just copy here the command because it's really long. So now it's compiling and it's outputting at this hello, and the input file is hello.ts. That's their main file. And if we look at this directory, you can see a 34 megabytes application, which is fun because it's actually smaller than the JavaScript that we had before. And we can simply run hello here, and the application is running. So it's a single file that's generated from the compile operation. To run tests, you simply run, let me show you the test before. This is a test. So you're importing from testing and assert, and testing is coming from the import map. So this is the frameworks actually in the standard library. So we're importing the asserts from the standard library, and then Deno.test comes from Deno itself. So this is the first test, and we're just checking equality here, and the same thing here. Here we are testing that if it's different than 3, we're going to throw, and then we can simply run Deno test. Actually, it's going to fail if we do that because we need unstable and import map, and then it runs. Okay, and you can actually see it failing. Let me open the application here. Let's open here the file. And let me just make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. So if we replace it with 4, and then we run test again, it's gonna fail. Just here, x should be equal to 3. Okay, so this is the Deno tests. Let me show you a little bit about how to use Visual Studio Code to run an application with Deno. You can see that it understands everything. The namespace understood, the methods are understood. I can actually navigate to the methods, and you can see it here, the methods. Okay, and if you go to the application itself here in the source directory, it actually understands the imports as well. So you can see here the source map, and you can navigate to the serve function, and you can actually see the source code here as well. This is actually interesting. You can see that the file is at the my cache directory, Deno, deps, https, Deno land, and then some huge, I don't know what this is. This is probably some git commit hash, and then the function itself. So this is how it's stored in your machine. So the whole completion works. So if you come here and do serve, it will actually give you completion as well. IntelliSense works. And you can debug it. So if I actually do, for example, add a breakpoint here and add another breakpoint here, and then I can come here and run Deno as node, and it will stop here at this line. And then you can see all the variables and port and host and server and everything. And here the variables are here, and the call stacks here. So you can also look at the variables here. So you can write host here, and it will show here down here what it is. So let's just run it and then invoke it from here. And it's going to stop here. And you can look at everything and just inspect everything we need. And then we let it run. It answers as expected. So debugging works just fine, but how do you do it? Because the extension doesn't allow you to. So what you do to debug, and remember this source code is online, okay? You can get it. I'll show you the link later. You actually, on the launch.json, you actually run it as node. And then you change the runtime executable to Deno. And then you actually do Deno run, and your flags and the file you want. You let it run at the port 9229. And on the settings JSON, you actually have to use preview equals to false. Debug JavaScript use preview equals to false. So you can't use the JavaScript preview debug engine. You have to use the stable one. So if you do this, you can debug. It's simple as that. Because as Deno uses V8 inside, debugging is just the same as Node. Other flags that are interesting to watch here is actually to enable Deno. You have to do Deno enable, otherwise the extension won't enable. Then you tell it to lint and the import map if you're using import map, and then you need to enable unstable as well. And where do you want to import IntelliSense origins? So these are the URLs that you are gonna import for IntelliSense. So this is what you need to do. And notice that I also enabled format on save, so using the formatter for Deno. So what happens if I do that? Let me show you. If I format it incorrectly, and when I save it, it goes back to it formats correctly. If I, for example, remove brackets here, it will actually add them back. Okay, so Deno is very opinionated in how it works. I'll show you again now with the command line. I'll save it without formatting. If I go to the command line and run Deno format, it actually formatted the file and brought back to where it was. Okay, so this is really cool. We also have the ability to use docs from the command line, as I mentioned before. So you can, sorry, didn't see that. I ran Deno doc and then the HTTP server, and actually shows you the whole docs for everything. Okay, so you have on the command line, you have the docs. To install a global application, just like an npm install global, you just run Deno install and the URL, and then I already had installed, so let's run it with -f. It's in the beginning, like this, and then you install exeval, which is a global tool. So you can see that it's in my home directory, Deno bin. Okay, and what happens is let's take a look at this file. It's actually just running Deno run on a global URL like this. Okay, so it's actually just Deno run, nothing else. This is actually an interesting tool. It will run a script for each new line. So what you do is just like this. You can, for example, cat a file and then exeval and do a console log and then write this is $ is the line, means the line. So I'm just adding the great sign here. So this is what happens right here. So this is a tool built with JavaScript, and it's super simple to install and use. Okay, so now let's go to a more real example. Let me close this Visual Studio Code, and I will run now a more real-life example of this application. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start creating a MySQL Docker container because we're gonna be running an API that's accessing MySQL. I'm actually exporting the ports here to my local machine, so the application that's running on Deno on my local machine is able to access MySQL. So what we do is we're gonna, first of all, we're gonna run the migrations. So we have migrations. Let me show you here on the DB. you have migrations. For example, creating users. This is creating a table and then creating the column name and mail and is active, etc. And then inserting values. Okay, so this is a migration. Here you have updating, adding a unique index and adding another column, and then again changing, and then here you have the seeds. Seeds is inserting a value inside the table. So it's creating values. So how do you do that? You simply, oops, let me copy the command here. You ran the migration like this. So it's actually pointing to a, oh, it's running now. Okay, so let me find the file. Okay, so it's running this, the CLI from Nessie. Nessie is the migration library, and then migrate. What happens is there is a Nessie config here, which informs that we're using MySQL here. So this is the client, and these are the migrations folder and the seed folder for the client options. So it just finds that. And we can also run the seed. So run the command seed, it will find the seed and run it. So here we created the user, etc. And here we seeded. Okay, so now we have the tables we need. We can simply run the application. So this is the application running. And it's just gonna output that it's running in a second. Here it's listening. And then we can talk to this application. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna use another tab here to log in. So actually, excuse me, to register. So we have just registered a new user with the password 123456. It gave me back the user information. And now we can actually log in with this user. So I actually log in with another user, the one I created on this during the seed. So you can see that when I log in, I get back an access token and a refresh token. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'll grab this token. Oops. So we'll grab this token. So it's in this variable now. Oops. Token. So it's in this variable now. And we can actually query our database for the users, and it will get, let me show you what I did here. I queried the 8000 port on the users endpoint and passed the authorization bearer token, and it gave me back all the users. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna do the same thing, but this user is an admin user. Okay, you can see that my user Gigi is a user, but João da Silva is an admin. Okay, if I do the same thing with a non-admin user, which is I'm gonna do now, with the Gigi user, and then I try to query the endpoint, I'm gonna fail because it's forbidden. Okay, so how does this work? Let me show you a little bit about the application itself. So what we're gonna see here is a whole application, API application, it's using a library called Oak, like that. So we have the import map here for where is Oak? Right here. And the application is right here. And we're importing from Oak the modules that we need and the Oak application and the whole thing. And then we're constructing the pipeline with the middlewares here. An error middleware, logger middleware, timing middleware, JWT middleware. So, and then we are adding the routes and the methods. and then we are listening. The routes is interesting to take a look at. So here are the routes, right? Sorry, this is not what I wanted to show you. Let me see if I can find the routes. Routes, the application. Yeah, right here, routes. So the routes are here. So the router, so you have the login, the register, the token endpoints, the user endpoint, etc. So how are they implemented? So this is the login function. It's validating who can call it, and then here's the method. Actually, the method that's running. So the request, the credential, token. Maybe you can see the users endpoint because it's a little bit more interesting. Here, getting users. Here, only the admin users can query. And then I'm getting users from the user service and then responding with the users on the response body. Get users is simply a call to the user repo. Let's take a look at that. And the user repo is using another ORM to query the DB and actually create users from that query. Okay, so this is the whole thing. There are more interesting examples here that you can take a look. This application is on GitHub, and I'll show you the link again in a minute. If you run Deno lint on this application, it will show you a few errors. It's unstable. For example, this should be const, for example, or you are using the incorrect casing here, so it's incorrect, so etc. Okay, so it's actually showing you things you can improve. And that's it for our demo. Just closing up. Will Deno replace Node.js? I don't think Deno will ever replace Node.js. I think that some ideas from Deno are going to port to Node.js. For example, the security things are for example, not being allowed to run and do everything like access the network or files, etc. That's something that the Node.js team can actually implement really easily. Maybe they can actually support TypeScript too. So some ideas I think will go back to Node.js. But I don't see Node.js disappearing. Maybe what happens is Node.js keeps going and Deno disappears because it's a really young project and maybe it doesn't succeed. Another option is Node keeps going and Deno becomes larger or smaller than Node. Okay, so there's no real. We don't know how big Deno will be, and even if it will survive in the next year. So this is really a bleeding edge thing, technology that may or may not survive. If you ask me, I like it a lot, and if it would be up to me, yeah, we wouldn't use Node anymore. We would only use Deno because it's actually much better. But this is not how the market works, so we have to watch and see what happens. Should we start studying Deno? Out of curiosity, yes, sure. Go ahead and learn it and have fun. Professionally, if you are just starting your career, I wouldn't do it because it might not survive, and if you stood Deno, you spent your time on something that is gonna might die, and you need to focus on more essential knowledge that you don't have. So don't work on Deno. Work on study on things that are more essential. If you're more experienced and you're already more senior developer, maybe you can study Deno, and you can, if you succeed, then you're gonna be ahead of everybody. And but there's a possibility that it will fail, and then you just lost time. Okay, so it's something you have to wait and see if it's worth it, and if you wanna bet on it, because it just might end up nowhere. Here are the resources. So the links for the presentation is this, bit.ly/Deno Talk. In this link, you can find the presentations I just did on GitHub, and then you can download them and study them and see how everything works. Also, you can find this presentation, this slide deck is also available at this link. Okay, so that's it. Thank you. If you want to talk to me later, you can find me on Twitter at Giovanni Bassi. Let me see if you have any questions that I can answer here. Okay, so we don't have any questions. I'll just finish here then. Thank you, and that's it. Bye-bye.